Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is going to be such a fun call. I've been looking forward to this call for so long. Really excited to be here with Kayla. Before I introduce her with more depth and we get into talking more about communication, I was thinking we could start with a really short awareness practice that will give us like 3 minutes of some nice, luxurious you time, us time, and then we'll interview Kayla on all her tips and tricks on communication, which are really, really helpful for being a parent. But she and I have talked at length, and this is actually a system that can be used with communication with anyone in your life, adults, colleagues, love relationships, pretty much anyone that you are communicating with. And at the very end, if any of you have questions as we're talking, feel free to put them in the chat, because if at the end we have a little bit of extra time, we can reference the questions. We'll try to finish up in 1 hour. So this will be a nice, deep but short 1 hour call. And yeah, let's get into this. So sitting in a really comfortable position, sitting, lying down, whatever works for you. If you're sitting, making sure that your spine is straight. If there's any tension in the back of your neck, just relaxing your neck, tipping your chin closer to your chest. See if you can really gently bring the top of your head up towards the ceiling. It's like you're making more space in between your hips and the top of your head. And then, since we're talking about communication, if you want to close your eyes, if that helps you have more awareness in your physical body, that's great. Or you can open your eyes. If they're open, just keep them focused on one point in front of you. And just start by noticing all the muscles around your throat. Like wrapping around the back of your neck to the front of your neck. All the little muscles that are surrounding your vocal cords. All the muscles in your face. Just imagine how much we communicate with just our face alone and our expressions. Noticing all those teeny tiny little muscles in your forehead, in your temples, all around your eyes and your eye sockets, your cheeks, all the little muscles around your mouth. And then even inside your mouth, as Lisa said in her last week's meditation, it's a whole other world in there, inside your mouth. And then noticing your shoulders. What are your shoulders communicating? What's your posture communicating? Even noticing all the muscles that hold up your scalp and your hair, all the muscles that surround your ears, where you do all of your listening, or the majority of your listening. And then noticing your Wei Qi, or the energy that surrounds your body, your etheric body, and just your ability to perceive. Just noticing what you perceive with your energy field. Like a sense of feeling, perception. Noticing what you hear with your ears. And then again, taking one last moment to just scan the muscles from the top of your head down your face, the back of your neck and your shoulders. Then try to soften anything where there's tension. And if there are any other parts of your body that we haven't covered that are screaming out for your attention, just take a moment to put your awareness there. Our bodies are always communicating with us, and we get to decide when and how we're listening. And then we'll just dedicate the merit and the beauty of everyone showing up for this call, we'll dedicate all of our collective energy so that we may become more superb communicators, so that we may have some kind of insight or aha moment from this call that we can directly bring into our lives. When you're ready, if your eyes are closed, you can open them. Wiggle or stretch if you need to wiggle or stretch. Okay, so I want to introduce my beautiful friend Kayla, who specializes in fertility and pregnancy and motherhood. She's a naturopathic doctor. She has assisted over 50 home birth deliveries, helping out nurse midwives. That is so cool to be able to see so many babies being born. And her whole medical practice is focused on healthy motherhood, from the earliest conception stages to toddlers and teens. And as a mom, she knows what it feels like from personal experience, everything from preconception to planning, fertility, and raising kids in this crazy day and age. She's got 2 boys and 1 new baby girl. Thank you so much for being with us, Kayla.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's so neat that this many people want to learn or talk about communication because it's so hard. So just the willingness alone that, like we want to gather tools to be more effective communicators. I feel like that says a lot. I shared with you today, I kind of laughed today that today we were going to be talking about communication because I'll just be honest, I sucked at it today. And so just understanding this is an absolute process. And as silly as it might sound, some of these phrases and things I'll suggest you start to incorporate with your kids or your family or your boss or whoever's in your sphere. It takes practice. And once you have the practice, especially if it's someone you have frequent contact with, it almost trains the conversation. It's like the whole process is predictable and it makes communication a whole lot more smooth. So this will be fun. There's somewhere you want me to start or you just want me to dive in?
Well, I mean, this whole idea of, I was so fascinated when you and I talked some time ago about how you, like, we first just started with kids, right? And then you were like, no, but you can use this with everyone. And then I kind of saw the whole like genius behind your system and the brilliance of really empowering people and not trying to like put our energy into their experience. But if we just start with kids, I think that's like kind of the easiest way to get into it. Like, what's your favorite example of like a meltdown and how you employ this really simple communication method?
All right, so let's start with the most silly of meltdowns. It can be something that has a little bit more merit, but anyone that has kids knows that, oh gosh, something like, Mom, I want the red cup. Like they don't want the blue cup, they want the red cup. And it seems so urgent and so it's just so charged. Like everything a little person says is charged because they've learned, partly because adults don't always have good communication, that the more animated or the stronger they are, the more they get what they want. And so I think it's our job as parents, as adults in these little tiny humans world to help them have more effective communication. And so my ultimate goal with my kids, for instance, is to help them kind of problem solve themselves. Because anyone who's been in a conflict knows that when someone provides a rebuttal to something that you're asking for, it just escalates the situation. Whether your tone is calm and collected, it just escalates. So in the example of the red cup, this is my now 5, but this was when he was 3. He was really particular about a red cup and not ripping cheese. If I gave him a piece of cheese that ripped, we were done for. So I got lots of practice with this. But Mom, I want the red cup. And I'll say, oh, and that's it. Mom, I want the red cup. Oh no. But Mom, I said I want the red cup. I know. And initially, it might go on a little bit longer, but once you train these little people with the system, like they realize that the disappointment's there and they automatically work through it because they know what action to expect from you. I'm not going to stop the dishwasher and get the red cup out of the dishwasher. I'm just not that silly. And so sometimes when you're earlier in these phases, it'll still escalate. I want that red cab. And you have to kind of respond with, oh, well, we're just not going to do that today. And it's neutral and it cannot be charged. Or I'm glad you'll get to drink out of it tomorrow. It'll be clean. And it's almost like a distraction, right? Like you answer their question, but like, it'll be clean tomorrow. And they really start to work through it so much quicker. For older kids, when they're frustrated, like for instance, my 8-year-old, I don't want to do my homework. Oh, it's the same phrases. Mom, I'm tired. I want to go outside and play. Oh no. I really don't want to do my homework, Mom. I know. And you just wait, and the pauses are so uncomfortable that you cannot fill that space. You have to wait for them to respond. And the next step to these phrases after the sounds, basically, the oh no, or I know, the next step is usually to ask them what they're going to do. And as a child gets into older adolescence or teenage years, this is really important because you basically say, oh no, what are you going to do? And initially they'll be shocked that you even asked them, like, well, what do you mean? What am I going to do? I mean, what are you going to do? And so even my 8-year-old will say, well, I guess I could do it now and then I could go outside and play. I think that's a great idea. And the thing is, I don't care about what he ultimately decides. If it's a reasonable answer, he might say, if I just go outside and play, I'll come back and do it before dinner. Great. But you're letting them make their own decisions if it's reasonable, and then they ultimately feel empowered. So that's an important step, especially once you get to older kids, is asking them what they're going to do. Now, what if your teenager just got into trouble, right? They did something they really weren't supposed to do, and they almost have to dig themselves out of that situation. And as a mom or a parent, you almost want to come in and save them from it, because that's what we want to do for our kids, is take away the hurt, or, save them from the uncomfortable things of this world. So if that's the case and they don't have any ideas, you always want to get the teenager specifically to say that they want the help. So if you ask them what they're going to do after you went through the, oh no, I know, what are you going to do? The next step is often, I have ideas. Do you want to hear them? And they might say no, and you kind of have to respect that if that fits the situation. But if you can get them to say yes, then they're already listening and willing for you to share your own ideas. And that portion doesn't come from me. That actually comes from Bernie Goodwin. She's fabulous. And that getting the teenager to say yes is huge. So that's
But
with kids.
can we just walk through each section, because I feel like there's a little bit of different subtlety and nuance in each of the four.
Yeah.
I can feel it. It feels differently, right? So the first, oh, what are
Mhm.
you feeling when you're saying that? It's just like compassion, empathy, understanding.
Well, what's funny is as a mom, you're probably feeling nothing. Like you're irritated. You're like, can we get on with dinner? So it's an artificial feeling if you're being completely honest with yourself, but kids are smart and they pick up on it. And so you're right. You do have to have this level of compassion of like, oh, you want them to feel heard without you expressing with any phrases that you feel sorry for them. Because we know as adults that does nothing to sit there and gravel and feel sorry for ourselves, even if it's over something trivial. And so you're right. You show compassion with, oh no. And you just change almost the duration that you put emphasis on different syllables, and you're paying attention to their cues. You have to be a good communicator and look at what they're telling you they need too.
I hear you saying, I get where you're at. I really get where you're at.
Yeah.
It's like, I get where you're at. I mean, that would be sort of like the adult
Mhm.
version. I really get where you're at.
Mhm.
And then what's the third one?
It's usually, I
Oh,
know. And
wow,
you
that's
might,
like I really am at your level. Like I really understand. Like I
yeah,
really get it.
yeah. Yep. And that alone can often diffuse it. It's tricky when you change that for an adult, because my husband and I are both on the same page and we use this with our kids, and he uses it with his students and I use it with my students. So how the heck are you going to use a system? Because it just becomes irritating, right? You come home from work and you're like, today sucked. Oh, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because you both know that you're being put on the system. And so you often have to have a little bit more of a human reaction and know your partner's love language to get them what they need. But it doesn't work quite the same way with adults. Adults is something very different. Do we want to talk about adults yet, or do we want to talk about?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I mean, maybe not everybody on this call has children, and I think these communication techniques are incredible.
Well, and I feel like a lot of these, like I said, come from Bernie Goodwin and Love and Logic. If you have young kids, you know about Love and Logic, which is basically that if you want your kid to get out the door and they have to put on their shoes and grab their backpack, you empower them by saying, "Hey, we got to go here in a couple minutes. Do you want to put on your shoes or do you want to get your backpack?" And it's implied of, "Oh, well, I have to do both of those things, but I'm going to put my shoes on first." And you don't care what order they do it in, but you're helping them with the process of getting things done, right? But with adults, there is no love and logic for adults. There's one for kids, there's one for teens. There's not a lot of love and logic for adults. I think that's just knowing your partner and your relationship and having some humility and seeing your own demons at the same time. But if you think about a conflict that you've had recently, there is a very set there's stages that every conflict goes through, especially like, let's just say your partner. You picture your partner's coming home from work and you have something to discuss and it is charged and you are frustrated. You usually greet them and you have something that's probably hard for them to hear. It's like, I'm trying to think of an example. I'll go with another silly example. We have a water distiller because well, that's a very long tangent I won't do. We have a water distiller so that we're drinking clean water, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to fill. And I'm always carrying the baby and it's heavy and I can't carry it. And for whatever reason, that's like the one thing that my husband wants done when he gets home from work. It's like if a water hasn't been run for the day might as well be ruined. Like it's his silly thing and he knows it, but it's just the way it is. And so if we're going with that silly example, if he gets home and says, "You didn't run any water today?" Like, there's no water. Why didn't you run a water? It's easy. Like, it's just right there. I'm going to go on the defense of, do you know what I did today? I had calls. I talked to LOTUSWEI. The baby's teething. And I'm on defense because he set it up that way, right? But if he
Mhm.
had come through the door and been like, "Wow, you must have had a busy day. My gosh, no water got started." And there's no tone. Like, he gets the same frustration out, but he's acknowledging what my day must have been like. And he's still stating what he wished he saw happen, but there's less charge to it. And so most of the time, if you're thinking about a conflict that you're about to have, if you think, because we all do it, right? We like get all the words that we're going to say. And when he says this, then I'm going to say this. If you do that, but then you flip it in reverse. So instead of saying the hard thing, the thing that's hard to hear, stating your strong position of why you're right, and then they have to rebuttal and give you their position, and then you do this back and forth until you find the common ground. What if you just start with the common ground? And it's so hard to do because it doesn't like satisfy that itch of like, I want to be irritated. But if you can start with a common ground of whatever it is. I know we both like to have enough water in the fridge that's clean. This is so silly. You spare the back and forth. You know, basically, you just flip those conflicts in reverse. And we can do other examples, but I promise you it works so insanely well for adults, the workplace, and for your significant other.
I had a situation recently where I was sitting in my office and someone came in and they'd had this kind of difficult experience and they were like, kind of came in like, "I need to talk to you about something." And I realized, so, we had a conversation and I was really quick to find a solution for them.
Yeah.
And then about 20 minutes later, I was like, "Oh, shoot. I wonder if there was actually more to the story, but I didn't ask and I didn't listen as deeply as I would have had I not been like jumping to find a solution for them." And I think, of course, there's like the cliche thing about, men wanting to fix women's problems and women just wanting to be heard. So there's that whole thing. But we do it too. We're always trying to solve problems. So I can see how this system would, or this like style of interaction would help us just be more in the awareness of the present moment without trying to get involved in what their thing is and just letting them have their experience and asking them about it. What are your thoughts about that?
100%. I just think it's harder to do in real time. And one thing that's really helpful as well, we'll use the words table it. we'll say, like, if we're really, especially my partner and I, like if my husband, if we're frustrated and we're going to get nowhere, one of us will usually say, because someone's in the better space, right? The other person's not communicating well and the other person's in the better space. And it alternates. It doesn't, it's not like one person is perfect at this. But if it shouldn't be talked about at that moment, someone needs to say, can we table it? And you might table it for a couple hours or go on a walk later or talk about it at another time. But it just removes the charge is all so that you can, like you said, really think through how does it feel to listen to this person rather than think about what I'm going to say while they're talking as opposed to truly listening to them.
Yeah, and it feels like there's two different kind of situations. One is like someone comes and they have had like a difficult experience. Like it's almost like the kid experience, right? They've had something difficult and you're responding and just letting them have their experience. And then there's the other kind of style where it's like you're almost under attack.
Mhm.
How about how does this style of interaction work? Like let's say I'm here in this room and somebody comes in and they're like, "Ah," like super angry and like screaming at me. How do
Mhm.
you employ that in those types of situations?
Ugh. I mean, I try to, at one point, I used to think of myself as floating away in a bubble. You know, it's like, how do I detach from this so I don't absorb that energy so that I can be out here and see what's going on and almost try to get my wits about me before we have this conversation. And then I had someone really smart tell me, why would you unground yourself and float yourself away in a bubble if you're
Mhm.
about to have a difficult conversation? And so now I just picture that there's more space. Like I almost pictured them floating away in a bubble, like in a very respectful way of like, ooh, I'm just going to create a little bit of space here. And then you feel very grounded. Doing something physical. So like feeling your feet on the floor, feeling like staying in your body as opposed to
Mhm.
getting wrapped up in the emotions. Man. Yeah.
Well, and it seems like you're, oh, oh, I know. Oh my God.
Mhm.
You're not saying that you agree.
No.
You're making a sound. You're not saying, yeah, you should always have the red cup no matter what. Or like if I were under attack, for example, if I respond with compassion, it doesn't necessarily mean I agree with what they're saying. It
Yeah.
just means I agree that that's how they feel right now, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And depending on what their ability to communicate, they might perceive it as you agree with them. And but there's always time for clarification. And if you can just get past that point where someone feels heard, the clarifications can be made. In fact, oftentimes the clarifications are made after the fact. With my kids, when they oftentimes when they're have these big reactions, they're probably looking to bond and connect with me. And I know that as it's happening. But if I immediately give them a lot of attention around the undesired behavior, it's just going to potentiate that behavior. So oftentimes I'll detach myself. And it's almost like to keep that connection, you have to detach and have the really neutral tone and not show a lot of affection and just let the situation neutralize. And with kids, of course, it makes sense to sometimes get on their eye level or hug them, whatever, you know, your kid and what they need. But what I will do is try to not fuel the situation, not give it a lot of attention. And in the back of my mind, I know that that person, that kid is actually trying to connect with me. And so later, like not very long later, you better find a moment to sit down and color with them or hug them or ask if you can help them clean their room, whatever it might be, because they're craving that connection. You just can't associate it with the undesired behavior.
Mm.
I don't know how that works with partners or bosses, but I assume fairly similar, right?
Yeah, I could imagine a situation where if you detach too much, then people are like, you're not listening to me.
Mm.
But also, when we listen, we tend to absorb a lot of energy. So I can see value to just,
Yeah.
even if it's just like energetically, symbolically detaching from somebody who's really intensely emotional about something.
Yeah. Sure.
Mm. I remember actually this is many, many years ago when I was working as a crisis counselor. I had this realization, and actually, when I was doing flower essence consultations, if I was listening to somebody share an experience, if I had that like internally, like, oh, it was like I would absorb that. And I had to train myself to not have that feeling. Inside, it felt a little bit more cold, but it wasn't like a lack of compassion. It was just like, it's actually more like changing the sound, which I think you've said before too, to like, hmm. Like there's a difference between ah and hmm, right? Because you can just, you're like, it's there in the space. I see it. I see what you're going through versus like pulling it in and trying to take it from, take the suffering from someone.
Absolutely. Anyone that really is perceptive of their environment or someone else's energy, I will recommend they zip themselves up at the start of the day or like before a visit. Or like kids that don't know they're highly sensitive. Do you know how overwhelming that is? And I just look at them in my office and I'm like, someday this is going to work for you. I promise. But right now it's insanely overwhelming. So you got to picture that, some of the stuff can bounce off of you, but having especially kids or adults zip themselves up at the start of the day just to create a little bit of that energetic barrier. And then flower essences might be the best thing to really disrupt that static or that energetic barrier in a room, especially the sprays.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the sprays in your car. I've started keeping it's just lined up on my dash, like this little compartment I have. I have the little sprays because they just diffuse the whole car, especially when you pick up a kid from school, you're driving to have dinner with your husband, whatever it might be, just to change the environment in the car to feel a little bit more fun and light is so nice.
Yeah. Let's
Mhm.
do a couple more examples because they're really fun. What about like picky eating? Like freakouts about kids not wanting to eat stuff.
Yes, this is happening at our house as well. My the biggest thing is trying not to give in to picky eating. Like your child's preferences, the things that they're stoked about, that they want to eat, and you know what they're a little, Be really careful about making two separate meals. And this goes for husbands too. I'm sorry, but like everyone just needs to be eat the same meal so that a mom's not having 7 pots going on the stove. But it works. It's actually the same kind of reaction. I go through those same phrases. Like usually it's, oh, we're having this. Yeah, but we're eating this tonight. Uh-huh. I don't like this. Oh, I really don't like this. Oh no. You just keep making your pots, keep dishing it up, putting it on the plate. And I really don't want to eat this, mom. And sometimes if you just know they're not giving in, I'll say something like, well, I think you'll be hungry if you don't eat tonight. Like a very matter of fact statement. Instead of saying, I'm not making another meal. What do you think you're going to eat? Something like that. It actually just has to be a very matter of fact of, oh, well, this is what we're having. But tomorrow I'm going to make your favorite, actually. So that works out good. It's just diffusing and stating what you want to see and then just trying to like manipulate the situation just a little bit to get them to come around, right? Or I'll make suggestions. Okay, well, the chicken is the most important because that's protein and your body needs that. So start there. And they'll eat the chicken. And then before you know it, he's on to the mashed potatoes or whatever it might be, just because you've laid this like gentle groundwork. And you have to be consistent. So it's happened. I'm not eating this. Okay, I think you're going to be hungry. Or I'll put it in the fridge. If you change your mind, you can have it. I'll warm it up for you, but you're not getting the extra meal. Or sometimes whatever we ate at breakfast, if he doesn't finish it and it'll get to be lunchtime and I'll say, oh, I put this in the fridge for you. So finish this and then I'll get something else. And you can just see the disappointment in his face of like, oh my gosh, I didn't finish my breakfast and I have to eat this now at lunch before I can have something else. And we've made it all the way to dinner before and I get the same thing back out. And I promise it'll happen once. It will happen once. Kids will not starve. And that's not something that like makes him want to throw up or nauseous. It's just something he'd prefer not to have. And he's kind of stubborn.
Okay, so how old do you start how old do you start this process with? Like
I would
you've
start that with food introduction.
food
A
introduction.
a little bit, yes. I mean, of course, your food introduction is a little bit different because then we're talking about a 6-month-old baby. But listen, those littles are really, really smart and they're going to start to develop preferences really soon. And so you are in control of these tiny little people with their plate in front of them. Put one thing on the plate. Treat them like a gourmet restaurant where they're served their salad and then their soup and then their meal. Like put the thing you want them to eat and then add something else. And so they have less decision making. And then don't push it too hard. If there's something they really don't like, don't keep putting it in front of them, of course. But I would start it as soon as possible. The other thing I'll say is, well, I really don't like tomatoes, Mom. I know. I wonder when you might start liking them because taste buds change. And then you can describe to them, taste buds and preferences change. You might like them later. And they have come around for some things, but it's like laying that gentle groundwork for being flexible, right? We got to learn to be flexible, and it starts young.
Flexible on both sides. Like someone just commented that that's how her mom used to force her to eat meat when she wanted to be a vegetarian. I remember my mom telling me a story of like when she was like a real kid, little kid with a little tray on her
Yeah,
chair or whatever, and her mother said, if you don't eat this oatmeal, like you're gonna sit there until you eat it. And I think she sat there like all day.
I know.
Like
And
you're not saying do that. You're basically just trying to get them to be flexible because I think what we see now is like a boomerang effect of that rather than the parents being like that. Now the parents are more like, oh, okay, I'll do whatever you want, honey, just to make you happy. And we'll make 10 other meals to
yeah,
especially for you.
there's
That's what
something there's something in between, right? Like for example, at bedtime when kids haven't eaten enough during the day and they say they're hungry and dinner's over, I'll offer them a cucumber or a carrot. And they know that that's kind of their options. Like it's an option. It's kind of like love and logic. I'm fine with them choosing the cucumber and a carrot, but I'm not going to make them toast, something like that. And so if they, I know, I'm promise I'm flexible too. It doesn't sound like it, but just something that is a reasonable option. And then they learn really early to eat when they're bored and stuff too. And so it's like, well, great. If you're hungry, let's eat something nutritious, especially after the meal.
Women's tea. Women's tea.
Luminous cheat. I know. Tell me for me or for the child.
There was somebody asking about if you're introverted and you have a hard time talking, if you get tired from other people's energy. Okay, so give us another adult example, maybe like a work example or um, something less charged than like your love partner, but maybe you're at work and your colleague's upset with you for some reason.
I have fewer of those examples because I work from home at this desk, but which is really good for me. I mean, I'll give you a more charged relationship one because I mean it's fresh and it's recent. And
Okay.
I think that I don't think we talk about relationship struggles enough. I remember like, oh gosh, it's been 5 years, but like my husband and I had that dark, dark spot where we were in Arizona and in the thick of like paying off student loans, and it was awful. To be honest, it was awful. And so when all of that was happening, I remember someone I confided in told me about a situation when they felt like they were on rock bottom. And I was like, oh, thank God. And I remember at that point, just knowing that I would be willing to talk about it because, especially young couples and young relationships and marriage, if they start thinking that everything is hunky dory and there are no disagreements and no one talks about those dark rock bottom moments, that's just the way it is. And that's not true at all. But I do think it's helpful to have some kind of framework, especially with your partner. Like ideally, you've worked through some tough stuff before the big thing comes up, because then that makes it incredibly hard. But these same kind of rules apply, especially the reverse order, right? So something came up recently that reminded me of Arizona and that really dark, awful time, right? Where he went and slept on his friend's couch. Like it was one of those kind of moments. And it reminded me of that. And I had so many things that I wanted to say, and I reversed the order, right? Like I said, I know when you work this hard and you're this busy, you have to find a way to unwind and you have to detach a little bit. And coming home, you come home to a lot. So I validating, right? Like trying to see it from his point of view and then just saying, but like it's not working. So I need more. Like I need more when you get home. And I'm sorry, but like we can't go through this again. So what are we gonna do? But you see that? What are we gonna do? Because I have all the solutions, but just in that moment of being willing to hear what he has to say, because ultimately I know what my ideas are. If you think about a conflict, you want to know where they stand. And so that alone was the most powerful thing to get us to a resolution, is reversing that order, not attacking him, not bringing up all the old junk, but basically saying, I love you. I don't want to go back there. This feels a little bit slippery. How do we avoid this? What's your ideas? He had great ideas, wonderful ideas, better ideas than I had. But it's so stinking hard to get yourself to do that, especially when you feel hurt or unseen or unheard, right?
Oh, I love that movement or transition, the swift transition into what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
So then you just avoid the whole,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
amazing.
yeah, absolutely. If you're with someone and you have the same values and you have the same vision for a life together, like what's the point of all the back and forth? It all comes down to the values. Or what we do, or what we are doing, or how we interacting, does it fit what we said we would always do for us and our family? And there's going to be times where both people are going to completely flounder from that. And you got to be called out on it and you have to be willing to hear it. I said, I think I said in a message to you once, like both partners can't be tapped out at the same time. Like that is the recipe for disaster. And so if there's this willingness of knowing, like, when I feel super done and we're not in a good spot, I need you to step up because if both of us are tapped out, I mean, that ends in divorce, that ends in separations and things that may not be in the best interest of the relationship that you plan to have with this person. So,
And
yeah.
how does that work? Like when you say, like I'm tapped out, you gotta, like, what's the outcome of that?
Well, I guess I say, I don't know if I actually say I'm tapped out. I think a lot of things, we're talking about communication and things we actually say, but so much of it, your partner knows when you're tapped out. It's a scary place when you see that, like, oh, they're glossing over or they're more withdrawn. And so I think a lot of it is nonverbal after a certain point if you commit to communicating with one another. But I mean, you can have those phrases, just like the table it to handle it later. You could just say, like, I'm feeling tapped out. Like, I need you to do this. I guess where I'm coming up with that idea is, um, back when we had our really rough spot, I had a girlfriend who had been through something similar and shared a lot. And one of the things she said is she could hear me talking, and there was so much, um, I was so done. So you could hear it in the voice of like, oh, like I'm just done with dealing with this. And she corrected me and basically said, if you use that tone of voice with him, if you say those things, you guys will not come back from this. I was like, what? I mean, your best friend's calling you out. That doesn't feel good. But she was 100% right. And she basically said, you have to wait until you can a little bit lie through your teeth. Because if someone you are invested with gets the feeling that you are just done, they're either have a personality where they're like, whoa, I got to try harder, or they're going to completely withdraw. And her question to me was, are you willing to take that risk? Because if you're not, you better remind him all the things that you love about him so you guys can get back to that same place. And we both thank her. He knows all these stories now. And when she's coming to visit in a few weeks, and he's always like, thanks for saving my marriage, Jennifer. Thank you. So I don't know. It becomes a little light once you're through these things.
Any tips for the type of person who tends to like withhold or like suppress or not speak? We have all these like, oh, I don't want to say it. I'm afraid I'm gonna hurt their feelings, or it's too hard for me, or the hard conversation, or how are they gonna respond, or will I be abandoned, or oh, there's so many. Right. So any tricks for like making sure that you don't stuff it?
Yeah. I think you can simply say, I, because I think when you stuff it, there's almost this, oh, imaginary everything's okay, right? You just wake up, you make your coffee, you go to work, you come home, you have dinner. Like it's really easy for things to get complacent. And so I think if you can just simply say, things are off and we got to keep this on the surface. That's something we use as well and I've even used that with family members. My mom and I have a wonderful relationship, but at certain points I'll say like, this doesn't feel good. Like, can we keep this on the surface?
What does that mean? Keep this on the surface.
So it means don't stuff it. It means you can table it, you can talk about it later, and maybe it's not the time for it, but you cannot stuff it down. It has to be resolved at some point. In fact, many people who have gone through couples counseling and those sorts of things, they will advise that you have like a family meeting, and it's a monthly meeting where you go on a walk and you talk about anything that needs to not be stuffed. And I mean, I know some of these things sound so ridiculous. I used to think they were ridiculous too. In fact, to be honest, we're not doing our monthly meeting. We should probably incorporate that again. But 6-month-old baby, all those things get thrown on the back burner. But just a time and space to not bring everything up, because you got to be careful you're not just pulling things out of the past and going tit for tat or anything, but just a time and space to air some of the frustrations with the common goal in mind of we'll get to a solution or we'll let it fizzle. We'll let it be done.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What's the number one thing that you do when you're like carrying 15 bags of groceries and kids are screaming and fighting and tearing everything apart and you're like stressed to the max? What do you do?
I say pause. I actually say it out loud because everyone needs you at the exact same time. I remember I wanted to scream when both children were talking to me at the same time. The baby was starting to cry, and my husband comes in to ask me what's for dinner. And I was like, does no one see that everyone's talking at once? Like, do they really think I can hear them? And so I will often say, whoa, pause. And now they just sort it out. Whit will be like, you're talking first, and Grant will ask his question, and everyone just goes around and says what they need to say. But just pause is a really powerful thing because stop is emotionally charged, right? You can rarely say stop without it feeling like, oh, why? What? But pause implies that you're going to meditate for 2 seconds before you tackle the situation. It's just a pause.
I love that. I
Yeah.
don't think we do that enough. I was just thinking the other day, there's so many times when, like me personally, I feel under pressure to make a decision or do a thing or have got people waiting on me. And it's so much better to just pause. So much. It's that space, right? It's like the space in between the thing that lets you make a better decision.
Like Lisa's meditation. Lisa talking about the space. Will you summarize quick for people here what she discussed about giving more focus to the space rather than the objects in a room? I guess that's pretty much it, but
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you, like if you just look around your room, our habitual tendency as human beings is to focus on the objects, right? And so it's like, oh, I see a door, I see a cabinet, I see a light, and the energy, it's like the vibe of that is like your energy going out. Whereas if you look around the room and you're like, whoa, I see this space in between that door and the space between the ceiling and the floor, and you're seeing all the space, your body shifts into more of like a receptive, receiving position. And then she'll also, take it a step further and say, imagine that that space is compassion. Like the space is just charged with compassion. And then basically, like you're swimming in this compassionate sea of space that's like so supportive. And, then you can like move your body differently and take up space and be nourished by space. And I find that a lot of people say with flower essences too that there's a similar quality between meditation and awareness practices and flower essences and what you're saying, which is oftentimes when you just start taking flower essences, you in the beginning you notice, whoa, like this thing used to irritate me and it doesn't anymore. Or, something really heated or intense will come up and you notice that there's just like more space between you and that emotion. Like you feel the emotion, but it's not like you're not like a marionette where it's just like controlling you. There's just a little more pause in there, right? I feel like that pause, that space, it just gives us so much more breathing room and freedom to operate differently or make a micro move differently, right?
yeah. And if you have the ability to do that, like Lisa, who's doing these meditations and teaching people and like sparking these ideas of like, you can pay attention to the space. I feel like, and especially as moms, I think we have a lot of women on this call, but you set the tone for your household. And so unfortunately, that's a lot of pressure because if you are frazzled and busy and overscheduled and all those things, the kids feel it too, and your husband feels it too. But if you can create more of the space, the best thing a kid can tell you is that they're bored. In fact, when my kids come out of the room and say they're bored, I go, oh, I can't wait to see what you do. And it doesn't require anything else. I don't apologize for it. I don't say it's bad. And they end up doing the greatest things. And so I think we all need that moment just to check and to pause and to bring more of that into our daily living. But if you're a parent at home, we have to teach these little people how to do it too.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that class. She's doing another live stream if anyone is interested in. Uh,
10
it's
minutes.
it's in the chat window in
Yeah.
an hour.
Okay.
In an hour. 6 o'clock Pacific time. Yeah, if anyone wants to join, you're welcome to.
Bring chocolate.
Yeah, bring chocolate. Oh, okay.
Oh, you know what else is really fun and small? And then I want you to talk about the flower essences that, you know, when I call you sometimes with these things that, I mean, I messaged you today and I'm sure you were like, Kayla, will you just get out infinite love? You know, like,
No.
oh, well, you could have, but I want you because your suggestions are always so spot on and not always what I would think of. But the other thing with communication that can be really helpful is to be careful when you're saying the word but. If you replace the word but with and, that's all you have to do. If you walk away from this call and you don't remember all those phrases and you do nothing but replace the word but with and, it will change your communication and how something is received that you're saying.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Huge. Mm. Well, we can talk about flower essences for speech. I can just do like a quick little rundown. Let's see, if you are going to be like wanting to connect more deeply with someone and try to anticipate on a more intuitive level what they need, I would grab sacred awareness. Yeah, it's also really good for like these Zoom calls. We're thinking, oh, how do I say things in precisely the way that people need to hear them? How do I like reach out and grab just the precise thing that's really going to benefit somebody? That would be sacred awareness. Truth teller is more like, oh, cool. Justin set these all out, I think. Truth teller is, it's like smooth communication. It's sometimes when you want to say something and like you're stuttering or gets stuck in your throat, um, it just helps things kind of flow out like water. It's also really good for if being afraid to say something like, I'm afraid I'll get angry. I'm afraid I'll hurt their feelings. Uh, and also asking for what you want and knowing that you deserve it. And just like overall being able to communicate really well. There's a whole different kind of thing going on with divine truth. Divine truth is more, mm, okay, here's how I can explain it. Whereas truth teller, sometimes there is an element, people don't like truth teller, the idea of it, because it's like, oh God, what if I say something and I destroy something? Or what if my anger destroys a relationship, right? I think this is like a really core level fear for a lot of us. Truth teller helps us alchemize our anger and it helps get us more comfortable with holding anger in our body so we can actually advocate for ourselves and others despite feeling anger. Okay, divine truth is a whole other ballgame. This is like we could light the whole place on fire and we're okay with it. It's like we could be having a meeting, having an argument, having it be really charged, having like something that you would call conflict. And it's still okay. And we can still hold it. And we can come closer together and much more like intimate with each other, um, despite having conflict, if that makes sense. It's also really like getting you rooted into what is your truth? Like what's your truth and your commitment? I think it's great for relationships because you can have really like dynamic, arguments and conflicts, but you're rooted in that sense of commitment and the person that you're talking to knows you're not leaving. You're not running out of the room. You're not abandoning them. You're like in it. And you're committed to that relationship. So I think those are the three that are most directly connected with speech. Although you could throw a little infinite love in the mix if you want just more soft energy. How about you? Any favorites for motherhood or raising kiddos or
Joy
babies?
juice comes up a lot because it allows us to pause, right? Because usually it's in the moments of nothing that you experience the joy. If we're just on a rat wheel, you don't experience that. So I would say joy juice comes up a lot. I think one time you described it as when kids asking you to play and you're like, but I got to do this, I got to do that, rather than just sitting down and playing with the train for 2 minutes. It doesn't take much. And so joy juice comes up a lot. Um, Little minds, like they're kids these days, I just think they're so in tune with how much is going on, even if they don't know what's going on, they just feel it. And so quiet mind and inner peace, even if a kid doesn't have anxiety or struggle with sleep, it just is such a nice, it's like a little security blanket that feels so good to them. And so I use those a lot too.
Mm. Well, I want to make sure that we end on time, and I also want to leave time for you for us to share that you're doing flower readings now with LOTUSWEI, which I think is really exciting.
Me too.
Is there anything like for people who don't know you as deeply as I do, what are some of the kind of like magical like sprinkles that you could add to a flower reading that I couldn't or Taylor couldn't or Lisa couldn't, that's your special sauce?
Well, first of all, the questions that you're sent before a consult are brilliant. I've added some of your guys' questions to my intakes because they don't have to be intense. They don't have to, it doesn't mean you have to air all your deepest feelings, but it's just like that suggestion of like, what could be different or what's hard? What's your, there's some big stuff in there. But I feel like when those things, there's a lot of power in just saying what you want to get out of the consult in general, like just setting that intention and going into a consult, being willing to receive, I think is really beautiful. And, with all flower essences, it's the patient, it's the client that is deciding their own treatment. And I want to say that I'm really well removed, but I'm a really good listener, and we don't have to air over all of the things that you're struggling with. But there tends to be something that comes up that I can see just being a mom myself that it's like, oh, and it's that thing. And so when you're trying to decide between a whole host of remedies, oftentimes it's something that's not necessarily said that completely changes the remedy that you might most be needing. And so I don't know if I didn't explain that very well, did I? It's a hunch. It's a
You've
sixth
got like
sense.
a mom's intuition.
Yeah, it's the kid that runs into the room. It's more something else that happens during the visit, something that was said or something on the intake that just can often be soothed, or that layer can be peeled with flower essences. And you probably don't need another thing to do. And so why not bring something into your self-care regimen that's not another thing to do? It actually feels glorious and like self-care, like something that's passive that you don't have to exert a lot of effort. And so that's always my goal, is to get the mom support without her needing to put more effort in if she doesn't have that. And secondly, giving yourself permission, because there's no reason that we shouldn't spend time on ourselves or nourish ourselves. And sometimes it's just that gentle suggestion of, why not? You deserve it.
Would you say that's like typically, because I'm not a mom, but what do you think that's a mom's number one challenge is taking time for herself when there's so many other things to do and tend to?
Yeah, I do. I really do. In fact, so much so I used to market a lot of self-care. And I think it really turns moms off because when you hear the word self-care, it's like, yeah, that'd be nice. And so it's truly, that's where flower essences deal more on the emotional level of like, why aren't you giving yourself that love? You're giving it to everyone else. Why wouldn't you show that to yourself? But it doesn't have to be a conversation. It doesn't have to be anything. It can just be bringing in the flowers you're attracted to and letting all the beautiful things unfold, because it really works that way. It really works that way. You're a genius. You're a magician. I keep calling all your team magicians because there's a lot of flower essences out there, but there's not the system. There's not the really easy to apply and incorporate into a routine. The system is beautiful.
Yeah, that's become so much more apparent over the years as we just need to move faster and help more get them into more people's hands because they are so impactful.
So
Thank you so much, Kayla, for all your wisdom and communication tips and all your beautiful, vulnerable stories. I really appreciate your heart.
thanks for having me on tonight. Hopefully
Thank
I'll
you
see
all.
some in the consult.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you all for coming.